If you love intense HFY stories where humanity turns fear into strength, hit like and subscribe so you never miss the next battle. Your support helps this channel bring you more powerful sci-fi stories full of emotion, strategy, and unforgettable human moments. The neural evaluation chamber at Varkin Military Academy was quieter than the combat arena, and somehow that made it worse. There were no cheering cadets, no metal shields, no roaring engines, no training drones circling overhead. Only a polished black floor, curved silver walls, and a single neural interface chair waiting in the center of the room like it had been designed by someone who hated comfort as a principle. Above the chamber, behind a ring of transparent observation glass, cadets from 12 military species stood in strict rows, watching with the kind of silence soldiers used when they wanted fear to look like discipline. Rowan Cade stood near the lower entry door in his plain dark academy uniform, hands tucked behind his back, studying the chair with open suspicion. "I have questions," he said. The assistant instructor beside him did not look amused. "You always have questions, Cadet Cade," Rowan nodded. "Yes, but these are important ones. For example, why does the academic furniture look like it wants my secrets?" No one laughed except one human technician standing near the monitoring consoles, and even she tried to hide it behind a cough. On the far side of the chamber stood Instructor Vera Enhal, the Academy's most feared neural examiner. She was tall, narrow-faced, and pale-eyed, with silver nerve filaments braided along her temples like living wire. Her species, the Enhalari, could enter surface thought through guided neural contact, but Vera was not famous because she could read minds. She was famous because she could find the thought a cadet protected most and press until discipline cracked. Cadets said she did not defeat bodies. She defeated certainty. One warrior had left her chamber unable to speak for an hour. Another had collapsed after reliving the moment his command unit abandoned him during a simulation. A third had begged to be disconnected after only 30 seconds, and no one had mocked him afterward because everyone had seen his face. Vera turned toward Rowan with calm, clinical interest. "Humans use humor during stress," she said. "Primitive misdirection, a verbal shield for an unstable emotional system." Rowan lifted one eyebrow. "Wow, we just met and you've already insulted my whole species and my coping mechanisms." "Fast work." The observation tier stirred. Alien cadets leaned closer. Some expected Rowan to finally stop joking. Others hoped he would not, because watching a human irritate Vera Enhal felt dangerous in a way that made the room more interesting. Admiral Valora Sin stood at the center of the upper gallery, severe in her dark fleet coat, her hands folded behind her back. She had requested this evaluation personally after Rowan's name appeared in too many unusual incident reports. Calm under pressure, disobedient when necessary, verbally reckless, emotionally adaptive. Those were polite academy terms for a human who kept walking into impossible situations and somehow coming out with allies, enemies, and a complaint about procedure. The senior instructor activated the chamber record. "Cadet Rowan Cade of Earth Exchange Division, you are entering a controlled neural pressure evaluation. Instructor Vera Enhal will examine fear response, shame response, memory stability, identity cohesion, and resistance to psychic intrusion. Do you understand?" Rowan looked at the chair again. "I understand that someone turned therapy into a competitive sport." The instructor's mouth tightened. "Do you consent to the evaluation?" Rowan exhaled. "Sure. Worst case, I learn something upsetting about myself and get graded on it." Vera stepped closer. "You should take this seriously." Rowan finally looked directly at her, and beneath the sarcasm there was something steadier. "I am." That answer seemed to interest her more than any joke had. She gestured toward the chair. "Sit." Rowan sat, then immediately shifted. This thing was not designed by a species with lower back muscles. A technician attached 2 neural bands to his wrists and one to the base of his skull. Thin blue light moved through the interface ring. Rowan's heartbeat appeared on the chamber display, faster than casual conversation suggested. Vera noticed. "You are afraid." Rowan gave a small smile. "Yes." She tilted her head. "You admit it easily. That's because lying to a mind reader feels like bringing a paper umbrella to orbital reentry." Vera's expression did not change, but something in her eyes sharpened. "Fear will give me entry." Rowan leaned back against the chair and looked up at the observation glass. "Fear lets everyone in. The trick is deciding who gets to stay." For the first time, the chamber became truly silent. Admiral Sin's eyes narrowed slightly. not in anger but focus. Vera moved to the neural interface and placed one long hand against the silver contact plate beside Rowan's head. When I enter, do not resist with noise. It will not protect you. Rowan closed his eyes. The jokes aren't there to protect me. Then why use them? Because disasters are already rude. No need to let them be boring too. The interface lights brightened. Rowan's fingers tightened once against the chair arms, then relaxed by force of will. Vera's voice softened into the formal cadence of neural entry. Cadet Cade, I will begin at surface thought, then descend through emotional response layers. If you attempt mental aggression, the link will terminate. Rowan opened one eye. If you find my 7th grade memories, I would like to apologize in advance. The technician glanced nervously at the Admiral. Vera ignored the comment, pressed her hand fully into the interface, and entered Rowan Cade's mind. At first she found exactly what she expected from a human: noise, fragments of jokes, irritation, a half-remembered song, a mental note about the chair being evil, a sharp image of Raylos lowering his head in trust. Fear, yes, but braided with stubborn humor and something almost annoyingly alive. Vera pushed deeper, certain the structure would collapse once she found the right pressure point. Rowan's voice followed her into the dark of his own mind, dry and steady. Careful in there. I don't label anything properly. Vera moved past the noise and reached for the first locked door. Behind it, something vast-breathed. Vera Enhal entered Rowan Cade's surface mind expecting disorder, and at first she thought she had been correct. Human thoughts moved with infuriating speed, not in elegant layers like Enhalari minds, not in disciplined streams like Koran officers, but in sparks, interruptions, fragments, observations, jokes, memories, and emotional reactions stacked so close together they almost looked untrained. There was an image of the neural chair with tiny, imaginary warning labels. There was a passing thought about whether Admiral Sin ever blinked or simply rebooted privately. There was a memory of Raylos lowering his head, followed immediately by Rowan wondering if dragon diplomacy counted as extracurricular credit. Vera moved through it with clinical irritation. Your mind is cluttered, she said inside the link. Rowan's voice answered from somewhere nearby, calm and dry. Yeah, sorry. I wasn't expecting guests. I would have cleaned up the existential dread. Vera ignored him and pushed deeper, searching for the first protected structure, the emotional hinge that held his confidence together. Every cadet had one: pride, shame, loyalty, fear, failure. Find it, press it, and the mind revealed what training tried to hide. The first door opened into fear, but not the kind Vera expected. Rowan was afraid of pain, yes, but not uniquely. He was afraid of death, but he treated it like an unpleasant fact rather than a sacred terror. The deeper fear was quieter. It wore the faces of people counting on him. It sounded like alarms behind sealed doors. It felt like arriving 10 seconds too late. Vera saw flashes of Rowan's past training, not grand heroism, just moments where he had failed small things and remembered them too sharply. A name he had not said in years. A hand he had not reached fast enough in a rescue drill. A message from home he had left unanswered because he was too tired, then regretted for months. Vera pressed into it. This is your weakness, she said. You fear being useless. Rowan's answer came after a pause. That's not a weakness. That's quality control with anxiety. She tightened the link. The chamber around them became a corridor made of old memories, walls flickering with moments of helplessness. You joke because you cannot bear the truth. Rowan appeared in the memory space a few steps away, arms folded, looking younger and more tired than his body outside the link. No, instructor. I joke because I can bear it. I just prefer not to do it silently. That answer annoyed her more than resistance would have. Vera had broken cadets who denied fear. She had broken cadets who hid shame under pride. Rowan did neither. He looked at the ugly parts directly, made some terrible comment about them, and somehow did not move away. She shifted tactics and pulled the memory corridor tighter. Images rose around him. Failure reports, disappointed instructors, alien cadets laughing. Earth officials warning him that humans had to be careful because one mistake could become a species-wide opinion. You carry too much expectation for a young soldier, Vera said. You are not brave. You are afraid all the time. Rowan's jaw tightened, but he did not collapse. Yes, Vera paused. Yes, I'm afraid all the time. I was afraid in the arena. I was afraid with Raylos. I was afraid walking into this room. He looked at her, and for the first time his sarcasm thinned enough for the steel beneath it to show. Courage is not the absence of fear. Courage is fear that learned manners. Vera felt the link tremble, not from Rowan breaking, but from something below him answering that sentence. She should have stopped there. The evaluation required fear response, shame response, and memory stability. Rowan had already revealed more than enough. But Vera Inhal had never been satisfied by surface readings, and the human mind irritated her precisely because it did not behave like a fragile thing. She pushed past Rowan's personal memories toward the deeper foundation beneath them, the ancestral pattern layer where species stored old instincts, inherited symbols, collective emotional shapes. In most minds, these layers were simple. Water for aquatic species, sky for winged species, pack calls for social predators, darkness for prey-born civilizations. Vera expected blood, hunger, noise, maybe primitive violence. Rowan's mental image snapped toward her, alarmed. "Instructor," he said carefully, "that door is not mine." Vera did not stop. "All minds are built from what came before." Rowan's humor vanished. "Yeah. That's why I'm telling you not to kick it open like a tax inspector." She pressed harder. The locked door beneath him cracked. Earth opened. Not a planet floating peacefully in space. Not the blue marble from diplomatic files. Vera saw cold first. A brutal ancient cold under a sky full of indifferent stars, where small human figures huddled around fire while predators watched from the dark. She saw storms flatten shelters, oceans swallow wooden ships, disease move through crowded rooms, fields fail, cities burn, parents hold children through nights they could not fix. She saw humans running from things larger than them, then turning back for the ones who had fallen. She saw fear repeated across centuries until it should have become surrender, but it did not. The images came faster. Hands building walls after floods, strangers digging through rubble, doctors refusing to leave, soldiers carrying enemies because mercy had survived the battlefield, children laughing in places where laughter made no strategic sense. Vera staggered inside the link. Rowan stood beside her now, quieter than she had ever heard him. "You were looking for the thing that made us stop hurting," he said. "Bad news. We never found it." The memories surged around them like a tide of firelight and grief. Rowan looked at humanity's impossible weight and finished softly. "We just got really good at carrying it." Vera Inhal had entered thousands of minds, but she had never entered anything like humanity. The ancestral layer did not unfold like a clean archive. It rose around her like weather. Cold wind, smoke, salt water, dust, hunger, lullabies, warning cries, engine noise, hospital lights, battlefield mud, classroom chalk, funeral flowers, birthday candles. All of it layered together until memory stopped feeling like memory and started feeling like a species breathing through broken ribs. She tried to impose structure on it, to separate fear from courage, grief from hope, violence from kindness, but the human mind refused to divide so politely. Every sorrow carried someone reaching out. Every disaster carried someone refusing to leave. Every dark place had a hand, a voice, a joke, a song, or a stubborn little flame held against the impossible. Vera staggered backward inside the link. "This is not one mind," she whispered. Rowan Cade stood beside her in the mental storm, his expression unusually still. "No," he said, "you opened the basement." The first images struck with ancient simplicity. A small group of early humans crouched beneath a cliff while rain hammered the stone above them. Their fire was weak. Their food was almost gone. Something large moved beyond the dark, breathing through teeth the firelight could not fully show. A child began to cry, and every adult turned toward the sound, not with irritation but alarmed tenderness. One woman pulled the child against her chest. One man stood at the edge of the fire with a sharpened branch, shaking so badly the point trembled. Another added the last dry sticks to the flame. Vera expected panic to become collapse. Instead, the little group moved closer together. Rowan watched them quietly. "We were never the biggest thing in the dark," he said. "We just got very good at standing near each other." The scene changed before Vera could answer. Oceans rose under black skies. Wooden ships cracked beneath waves. Sailors screamed orders into wind that did not care. One human slipped. Another caught him by the wrist, and 3 others threw themselves onto the rope even as the deck vanished under water. Then cities appeared, burning orange under smoke. People ran through streets carrying children, old parents, strangers, animals, books, anything they could not bear to leave behind. Then came rooms filled with sickness, where tired healers tied cloth over their faces and walked back inside again and again, even when fear touched their hand. Vera recoiled. Why keep returning? Rowan looked at one doctor sitting beside a patient who had no one else. Because sometimes returning is the only decent thing left. Vera tried to pull away from the flow, but the memories followed like a tide. She saw battlefields, and there the human mind became almost unbearable. Not because humans fought. Many species fought. She had seen war memories before. What unsettled her was the contradiction. A soldier dragging a wounded friend through smoke while laughing breathlessly about an old meal they both hated. A medic treating an enemy fighter because the enemy was young and afraid, and bleeding the same color in the dark. A letter folded into a pocket and read until the edges fell apart. A hand pressed over a wound while another voice said, "Stay with me," as if words could hold a soul in place by force. Vera turned toward Rowan, shaken. "Your species does terrible things." His face tightened. "Yes, and remembers them. We have to." "Why?" Rowan's voice went quiet. "Because forgetting makes it easier to do them again." The memories shifted again. Vera saw floods, earthquakes, towers of dust, collapsed homes, broken bridges, long lines of people carrying water, food, blankets, tools. She saw strangers crawling through ruins toward voices too weak to shout. She saw hands pulling hands from rubble. She saw humans cry while working, curse while helping, joke while exhausted, and sleep sitting up because lying down felt like surrender. She saw families rebuilding walls where old walls had fallen. She saw children learning letters in temporary shelters. She saw someone planting a tree in ground that had been burned. She saw old people telling stories so the young would know the world had ended before and still morning came. "This should have made you colder," Vera said. "This much loss should have made compassion inefficient." Rowan gave her a tired half-smile. "Yeah, well, humans are terrible at being efficient with feelings." Then she found laughter, and that almost broke her more than grief. Not simple amusement, not mockery. Laughter in hospital corridors after good news. Laughter at a bad meal during a hard winter. Laughter from soldiers too frightened to sleep. Laughter at funerals when someone told the exact wrong story and everyone remembered the person alive instead of only gone. Vera watched a child in a shelter make a ridiculous face with two spoons held like ears, and exhausted adults around them laughed until some of them cried. "Why is this here?" she asked. Rowan looked at the child and swallowed. "Because sometimes the world takes everything except one stupid moment, and if you can keep that, you are not completely beaten." The link trembled violently. Outside, alarms flickered somewhere beyond the mind, but inside the human memory field, Vera could no longer find the clean edge of the evaluation. She had wanted the memory that would break Rowan. Instead, every memory that should have broken him connected to another where someone stood up again. Not healed, not untouched, standing anyway. She looked at Rowan, and for the first time there was fear in her pale eyes. "How do you live with this?" Rowan did not answer immediately. Around them, humanity kept moving through storm and fire and grief and song. Finally he said, "Not alone. Never as well as we pretend. But we keep passing each other the weight." Vera tried to step back, but the memories surged higher, and the examiner who had broken so many cadets realized she had gone too deep. Outside the neural link, the evaluation chamber had become very quiet for a room full of alarms. The monitors around Rowan Cade's chair flashed in sharp blue and warning amber, showing rising stress patterns from both minds inside the connection. Rowan's body remained still, strapped to the neural interface with his eyes closed and his jaw tight, but instructor Vera Enhal's hand trembled against the contact plate beside his head. That was the first thing the observers noticed. Vera did not tremble. She was the examiner cadets feared because she could enter a mind and make trained soldiers collapse under the weight of their own hidden memories. Yet now her pale eyes had gone unfocused, her breathing had turned uneven, and the nerve filaments along her temples flickered as if something inside the link was pulling harder than she expected. A technician looked up toward the observation gallery. "Admiral Sin, her neural pattern is destabilizing." The senior instructor stepped forward. "Terminate the link." Admiral Valora Sin did not move. Her eyes stayed on Rowan's still face. "Not yet." The instructor turned sharply. "Admiral, the human may be attacking her." Sin's voice stayed cold. "Look at his hands. Look at his pulse. He is not attacking. He is enduring." Inside the link, Vera was no longer walking through Rowan's memories. She was being carried by them. Humanity moved around her in waves: storms, hunger, wars, songs, crowded hospitals, empty bedrooms, hands gripping other hands, jokes spoken in places where fear should have owned every sound. She tried to separate the images, but they refused to become orderly. Pain and tenderness were woven too tightly together. She saw humans hurt each other, then saw humans stand against that harm. She saw cruelty, yes, but she also saw people hiding strangers, feeding enemies, building shelters, crossing oceans to help those who would never know their names. She turned toward Rowan, who stood beside her in the memory storm, quieter than any version of him she had seen before. "Your species is contradictory," she said, and her voice no longer sounded like judgment. It sounded like someone trying to stay standing. Rowan looked at the scenes passing around them. "Yeah. We've been trying to file a complaint about that for a while." Vera tried to find the center of it, the single structure that allowed humans to survive so much fear without becoming only fear. Every species had a center, a nest, a pack bond, a command hierarchy, a sacred law, a survival pattern. Humanity had too many: family, anger, hope, memory, guilt, love, spite, music, bread shared in the dark, a hand on a shoulder, a terrible joke before bad news. She saw a human soldier give water to someone who had been an enemy an hour before. She saw a tired mother smiling at a child while hiding her own fear. She saw workers rebuild a street that had been destroyed, then paint color on the wall before the roof was even finished because beauty had become a form of defiance. "This should not function," Vera whispered. "A mind cannot carry grief and hope in the same place for this long." Rowan gave her a sideways look. "You'd be amazed what people can carry when nobody gives them a better option." The memory storm tightened, and Vera staggered. For the first time in the evaluation, Rowan reached toward her, not touching, just offering direction. "Instructor, you need to stop trying to understand all of it at once." She ignored the advice by reflex, and the link punished her for it. The next memory was small, almost nothing compared to the others, and that was why it cut so deeply. A shelter room after a disaster, rain tapping against a cracked window, adults sitting on the floor, hollow-eyed with exhaustion, wrapped in blankets, too tired to speak. Then a child made a ridiculous face with two spoons held beside their head like ears. One adult laughed, then another. Then the whole room broke into laughter that was half grief, half relief, and fully human. Vera froze. "Why does this matter?" Rowan's face softened. "Because the world had just taken almost everything from them, and for 10 seconds it didn't get to take that." Vera looked at the laughing humans, and something in her discipline finally cracked. She had spent her life finding weaknesses in minds. She had believed laughter was often a mask, a distraction, a failure to confront pain directly. But here it was not avoidance. It was resistance. It was proof that the mind could bend around suffering without belonging to it. The alarms outside rose higher. The senior instructor took another step toward the termination panel. "Admiral, if we wait longer, both subjects may suffer neural backlash." Sin's gaze flicked toward Vera's shaking hand, then back to Rowan. "If we sever them while she is lost in his memory field, we may damage her permanently." The instructor stared. "You believe he is holding the link open to protect her?" Sin's expression did not soften, but her voice lowered. "I believe Cadet Cade has a habit of saving people who underestimate him." Inside the link, Vera heard the echo of that sentence without knowing where it came from. She turned to Rowan, and the storm of human memory roared behind him. "How does your species survive this much memory?" she asked. "Usually badly at first," Rowan said. "Then together," she swallowed. "And when together is not enough." Rowan looked around at humanity, broken and rebuilding, crying and laughing, falling and standing again. "Then someone stays beside you until enough comes back." Vera's pale eyes filled with fear. Not fear of Rowan, fear of the weight she had entered and could no longer exit alone. "I cannot find the way out," she admitted. Rowan sighed softly, the sarcasm returning like a small lamp in a very large dark room. "Yeah, human memories are like group chats. Too much noise, impossible to leave, and somehow your aunt is always involved. Stay close, instructor, I'll walk you back." Inside Rowan Cade's mind, Instructor Vera N. Hal stood beneath the weight of humanity and finally understood why the human had warned her not to open that door. It was not because he was hiding weakness. It was because some doors did not lead to secrets. Some doors led to weather, ocean, battlefields, hospital rooms, empty chairs, crowded shelters, lullabies, apologies, and jokes made with trembling voices because silence had become too heavy to carry. Around her, human memory moved in endless layers. A hand pulled a stranger from floodwater. A doctor stayed awake beside a patient whose family could not arrive. A child learned to walk again after disaster. A soldier carried someone who had worn a different flag. A family rebuilt a house with half the roof missing and still argued about where the table should go. Vera tried to focus on one path, but every path became another. I cannot separate it, she whispered. Rowan stood beside her, no longer smirking, no longer pretending this was easy. That's because it isn't separate. That's the annoying part about being human. Everything comes with footnotes. Outside the link, the chamber alarms sharpened. Vera's body swayed beside the neural chair, her hand locked against the interface plate, her nerve filaments flashing erratically. Rowan's body remained strapped into the chair, but sweat had gathered at his temples and his fingers had tightened against the armrests. The senior instructor finally moved toward the emergency severance control. Enough. The examiner is destabilizing. Admiral Valerasin's voice cut across the chamber. Do not touch that panel. Admiral, she is trapped in his neural field. No, Sin said, watching Rowan's pulse spike and settle, as if he were holding a door open in a storm. She went too deep. He is trying to bring her back. A technician stared at the readings. That is not possible. A cadet cannot guide a trained neural examiner through his own ancestral layer. Sin did not look away. Cadet Cade has made a habit of doing things that sound unprofessional on paper. Inside the memory field, Vera stumbled as a new wave rose. Sirens, ash, winter, laughter, songs, prayers, machines, engines. 1,000 human voices saying different versions of the same impossible phrase. Keep going, keep going, keep going. She covered her ears, though the sound was not sound. How do you live with this? Rowan stepped closer, careful not to overwhelm her. One piece at a time. There are too many pieces. Yeah. So stop trying to carry all of them. She looked at him with real fear now, stripped of rank and cold authority. I entered to test you. I noticed. Very personal. 0 stars. I tried to break you. Rowan's face softened with something that was not forgiveness yet but was close enough to hurt. I know. Why are you helping me? He glanced toward the storm of human memory, then back at her. Because leaving people lost in bad places is generally frowned upon where I'm from. Vera almost laughed, but the sound broke into a shudder. Rowan lifted one hand and the storm around them changed. Not gone, never gone, but narrowed. He showed her rain against a window, a warm kitchen light, a tired hand passing bread to another, a child asleep against someone's shoulder, a bad joke told at the wrong time that somehow became the right time because everyone needed to breathe. Do not look at the whole species, Rowan said. Look at one moment, then the next. Vera followed his voice because it was the only steady thing left. These are small. Small keeps people alive more often than speeches do. The path ahead formed out of ordinary things. Footsteps on wet pavement, a handrail on a hospital stair, a cup of tea, a name remembered, a door opened for someone carrying too much. Vera breathed inside the link, and for the first time the memories did not crush her. They passed through her like heavy rain. Outside, the monitors began to stabilize, but the senior instructor did not trust the change. He is altering the link structure. The technician looked closer. No, he is reducing stimulus exposure. He is filtering it for her. The instructor went silent. Admiral Sin's expression remained hard, but her eyes had changed. Of course he is. Inside the link, Vera saw the exit at last. A narrow line of pale light beyond the human storm. She reached for it, then stopped. You could have let me fall deeper. Rowan gave her a tired look. I could have also challenged Raylos to a wrestling match. I try not to make every bad idea a lifestyle. You should hate me. Maybe later. I'm busy. Vera stared at him, shaken by the absurdity and the mercy of that answer. Then Rowan placed one hand against the door of his own mind and pushed. They woke together. Vera tore her hand from the interface and dropped to one knee, breathing hard, her pale eyes wide with the remains of what she had seen. Rowan opened one eye from the chair, looking like someone had dragged him through several centuries and then criticized his posture. For a moment, no one moved. The academy cadets stared through the observation glass. The instructors stood frozen between accusation and disbelief. Rowan swallowed, turned his head slightly toward Vera and rasped, "So, do I pass, or did I emotionally damage the examiner?" Vera looked at him, still trembling, and for the first time since anyone had known her, she had no immediate answer. For once, the neural evaluation chamber did not know what to do with silence. The monitors had stopped screaming, but their warning lights still pulsed softly across the polished black floor, painting Rowan Cade's face in blue and amber as he lay strapped to the interface chair, pale, sweating, and trying very hard to look less shaken than he was. Instructor Vera Nhal remained on one knee beside the contact plate, one hand pressed against the floor as if she needed proof that the room was real. The cadets behind the observation glass stared down at them, with expressions Rowan had learned to recognize across species. Fear, confusion, and the uncomfortable discovery that the small human had not done what the room expected him to do. The senior instructor recovered first, because military pride often arrived before understanding. "Secure the human," he ordered. Instructor Nhal may have suffered a hostile neural response. Rowan turned his head slightly and gave him a tired look. "Hostile, sir. I just gave your mind reader the emotional equivalent of a guided museum tour through bad weather." No one laughed. Rowan sighed. "Tough room." Admiral Valera Sin descended from the observation gallery before the security team could move. Her dark fleet coat swept behind her like a shadow with rank, and every officer in the chamber straightened by instinct. She did not look at Rowan first. She looked at Vera. "Instructor Nhal," she said, "report." Vera's breathing was still uneven. The silver nerve filaments along her temples flickered weakly, no longer with power but with aftermath. The senior instructor stepped forward. "Admiral, I recommend postponing testimony until she is medically cleared. The human may have used defensive psychic aggression." Vera lifted her head slowly. "No," the single word stopped him. Her voice was rough, almost unfamiliar. "He did not attack me." She rose with difficulty, and for the first time since Rowan had met her, she did not look untouchable. She looked like someone who had seen the ocean after spending her life studying cups of water. "He endured," she said. "There is a difference." The chamber shifted around that sentence. Cadets leaned closer. Technicians glanced at one another. Admiral Sin's expression did not soften, but her eyes fixed fully on Vera now. "Explain." Vera looked toward Rowan. He was still restrained in the chair, hair damp, face pale. One eyebrow raised like sarcasm, was the last surviving member of his command structure. "I entered Cadet Cade's mind expecting instability," she said. "Humor as avoidance. Fear response hidden beneath noise. Primitive emotional clutter." Rowan murmured, rude but continue. Vera did not rebuke him. That alone made several cadets exchange alarmed looks. "I found fear," she continued. "Much of it, personal fear. Failure, grief, shame. The expectation carried by a young soldier who knows every error may become judgment against his species." Rowan's expression lost some of its humor. Vera turned back to the room. "I pressed those fears." He did not deny them. He did not hide from them. He named them and remained standing. The senior instructor frowned. "That is resistance training, not superiority." Vera's pale eyes moved to him and the room chilled. "I am not finished." He went silent. "I went deeper than the evaluation required. I opened an ancestral memory layer." Admiral Sin's jaw tightened. "Without authorization." Vera lowered her gaze. "Yes." Rowan gave a weak little wave from the chair. "For the record, I did advise against kicking open the basement." Vera's mouth tightened, not quite a smile, but close enough to disturb the room. "Inside that layer I saw humanity, not as a diplomatic file, not as biological data, as memory." Her voice became quieter, and somehow that made every word heavier. "I saw cold, hunger, storms, disease, war, cruelty, loss, and fear repeated across ages. I saw enough pain to deform a species into permanent bitterness, but beside it always there was something else. Hands reaching into rubble, food shared when there was not enough, doctors staying, parents comforting children while terrified themselves, soldiers carrying enemies, strangers becoming family for a few minutes because disaster had left no time for introductions." No one in the chamber moved. Vera looked at Rowan again. "I tried to find the memory that would break him. I found a species that had already broken many times and learned to build across the cracks." Rowan stared at the ceiling and said softly, "That sounded almost complimentary." "I'm uncomfortable." Vera stepped toward him. "When I became lost in what I had opened, he could have let me remain there. He could have allowed the same pressure I used on others to turn against me." Her voice thinned but did not fail. "Instead, he guided me out." The cadets looked at Rowan differently then. Not like he was dangerous, not even like he was strong, like strength had been the wrong word all along. Admiral Sin approached the chair and released the restraint with one touch. Rowan sat up slowly, wincing. Thank you, Admiral. I was about 30 seconds from filing a complaint with the furniture. Vera lowered her head before him. It was not a full bow, but from her it was close to surrender. I entered your mind expecting a fragile species, she said. I found a wounded one. That was my mistake. Wounds are not proof of weakness. Rowan looked at her, exhausted and embarrassed by the attention. Great, he said. My trauma got promoted. A few cadets laughed then, quietly at first, then with relief. Admiral Sin looked over the chamber. Record the result. Cadet Cade passes the neural pressure evaluation. Instructor Enhal's methods will be reviewed. Vera did not object. Rowan slid his feet to the floor and stood unsteadily. Behind the glass, cadets from 12 species watched the human who had not hidden fear, not conquered pain, and not broken the mind reader who tried to break him. The mind reader had searched for the memory that would shatter Rowan Cade. Instead, she found a species that had been shattered 1,000 times and still kept teaching its children how to laugh.